But it's this concept of as AI chatbots become more and more prominent within our daily lives, whether it's, ChatGPT or Google Gemini or the AI generated answers at the top of Google, that Google's going to start sending fewer and fewer clicks to websites. And then at some point, there will be this Google zero day where Google will send no clicks to websites. And so whenever you hear that, you hear publishers talk about Google Zero as if it's this pending day on the horizon.
The optimist in me says that AI right now, when it's scanning through all of the websites, is looking for useful content and looking for stuff that actually has real value for the reader, the person who's searching, the person who's looking for reviews. And that by citing the websites where you can go deeper, that's a good way to build and find the right links and the right trust and the right content that's developed for the right reasons, rather than just trying to optimize for some crazy search where it's about how dense are your links and how, did you get the right search term in there? And I know it's gotten better since the days when we were sort of feeding the search monster, but it's still not great.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. For today's episode, I spoke to Jim Louderback, the writer behind a newsletter called Inside the Creator Economy. Jim is a longtime media veteran who started out in magazine publishing and then eventually made his way over to the creator economy. He spent several years running Vidcon, the annual event where the world's biggest YouTubers connect with their fans, and he now helps organize creator economy events all over the world, including the 1 Billion Followers Summit in Dubai. In our discussion, we covered a wide range of media topics. We discussed whether media companies were overreacting from the threat of Google Zero, why athletes are the new super creators, and how YouTube will slowly devour Hollywood. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcast. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks, Simon.
So usually, as people who either listen or watch my podcast know, the usual format is that I find like a really successful media entrepreneur, and then I interview them about how they built their media business step by step. And you are a very successful media entrepreneur yourself, but that's not necessarily why I'm having you on. This is actually kind of like an experimental episode that you and I have been talking about doing. You write about the creator economy and media. I write about those topics, and I've always wanted to see if I could, have kind of like a regular kind of video / podcast series where we're able to kind of open up and talk about what's happening in the larger media landscape and not be so myopic. So we just talked about maybe just kind of, hopping on a Zoom call and doing something like this, talk about what's going on in the media, and just seeing where it goes. So I want to introduce you to my audience. So you have like a long history in their creator economy. I'd love you to just kind of like talk about that, but you also currently write a newsletter that's I think hosted on Beehive that's for creator economy. So like I know that you were formerly the CEO of Vidcon, right? So like what's kind of your background to tee us up with that, with like what's in your background with the creator economy?
Totally. So background, I mean, even before the creator economy and traditional media, I helped build a couple of magazines in the computer space, PC Week, PC Magazine, launched some early websites around that as well. I helped start the first cable TV network about technology called ZDTV. And, but then post that ended up building an early YouTube network called Revision 3. I sold to Discovery, helped the first set of events about the creator economy called VidCon, helped them build the industry side, and then took it over and sold it for them. And did that to Viacom, ended up there for 5 years. And now I basically write a newsletter, do events around the world about the creator economy, and think a lot about this stuff. So it's really fun to be here.
Yeah, so VidCon, that was originally started by Hank Green, is that correct?
Yeah, Hank and
Yeah.
John Green, they were early YouTubers and built that as a way to bring people IRL together because being a creator is lonely, even back in
Yeah.
2010.
Yeah, and VidCon was really the first, I think, peak that the wider public started to understand how popular creators were, because like they would just go to these early VidCons and just be completely mobbed by fans. Like it was ostensibly an industry event, but it was also like tons of fans would show up to it.
Well,
Right.
actually, so it started out as just an event for the in general,
Hmm.
and it became a big fan event. But it always, as of year two, had an industry day, and then an industry track, and then they added a track to teach creators how to do better as well. So the gist of it was it would always be a place for fans to connect to creators in real life, but also a place for the industry to get together, and then a way to teach creators how they could be the next big YouTubers.
So the analogy is more closer to like almost like a Comic-Con where like creative people would go to meet huge fans basically.
Exactly. It's sort of Comic-Con for online video fans, or Beatlemania, if I want to date myself, for online video fans.
Yeah. And so when did you leave VidCon?
2022.
2022. So you run this newsletter, and from what I understand is like the newsletter is kind of something that kind of segue. You do like events and stuff like that. That's like kind of your main mode of monetization.
Yeah, I help do track B2B event tracks at events in the creator space. So there's one in Dubai called the Billion Followers Summit where I built out their what they call the economy track. I do that at another event which is a little like VidCon, but it's just for makers and engineering and other STEM creators called Open Sauce. And then the newsletter is a way to keep that audience activated. I have sponsors in it as well. I don't do as well as you do. But yeah, so I just mix it all together and try and basically work to fund my travel habit and have fun writing about it.
And what's the name of the newsletter?
Inside the creator economy, and it is on LinkedIn and on Beehive.
So there's lots of stuff we want to get to today. The first thing I really want to talk about is something that I've been kind of following in my newsletter is this talk of what this term that you hear called Google Zero. The first person I ever heard use this term was Nilay Patel, who's the editor in The Verge. I don't know who originally coined it. Maybe it was him. But it's this concept of as AI chatbots become more and more prominent within our daily lives, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Gemini or the AI generated answers at the top of Google, that Google's going to start sending fewer and fewer clicks to websites, and then at some point there will be this Google zero day where Google will send no clicks to websites. And so whenever you hear that you hear publishers talk about Google Zero as if it's this pending day on the horizon. And it's something that I've always thought was completely overblown and ridiculous for reasons that we'll talk about shortly. But there's been a couple of developments recently that kind of push back on this idea of the pending Google Zero coming. The first was this piece in Press Gazette where they interviewed a lot of publishers and also showed some data that Google traffic has basically leveled off, and that for a lot of publishers, yes, they saw a decrease in traffic as Google has rolled out its AI generated answers, but overall, sometime within the last year, basically the Google traffic stabilized and it hasn't dipped further. In fact, some publishers have seen a recovery. And then the second item was, IIC, which is owned by Barry Diller. They own a company called People Inc., which used to be called Dot Dash Meredith, which used to be called Dot Dash before that, which used to be called About.com before that. And it's this company that's just been like, printing money for years. Like it's been one of the most successful like media stories that most people haven't heard of outside of the industry. And they create what's called intent-based content. So it's like product recommendations, it's product reviews, it's telling people how they, giving people advice on how they could live their lives. It's been basically the perfect advertising vehicle. But it's also creates the kind of content that you would think would be most vulnerable to AI generated answers, because that was what we were told, is that people would no longer look at websites when they're researching products. They're just going to ask questions into Google and then it'll recommend products to them. And they just released their most recent earning reports and said that their digital revenue has actually increased even as like some of their Google traffic is still starting to decrease. So I think like there's just a cute few data points here that kind of point to this idea of Google Zero being overblown. I guess like I'd love to just open it up to you and just like you talk to a lot of publishers, you talk to a lot of creators, like how significant is it in their mindset of this idea that Google traffic is going away?
Well, I will say one of the publishers that I used to work with at Ziff Davis and I were chatting about this 6 months ago or so. And one of the reasons why this sort of meme took off on Google Zero is because the publishers they really want it because Google in many ways killed their advertising business. If you think about it, back when about.com came out, before Google got huge and took over the whole advertising business, they were making a lot of money. And over time, 70, 80, some big percentage of the ad dollars started flowing to YouTube and search ads. And so in many ways, traditional publishers were, behind closed doors saying, hey, this is actually a good thing. If they're going to be disrupted, that's good because they disrupted us.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I will say disruption takes time. Back in 2007, 2008, when we started Revision 3, our tagline was kill your TV. And we were like, we're going to kill the TV with our YouTube creators and our podcasters. And, here we are almost 20 years later, and that hasn't happened. But think about how many people still subscribe to a cable bundle. It's not the 80% or 90% that it was in its heyday. It's down around 50%. But television, traditional television, has been seriously impacted, but it's taken 20 years. And I think if it's gonna happen, if we're gonna get even close to YouTube Zero, it's not gonna just happen in a year.
Google Zero.
Sorry, Google Zero.
Yeah, yeah.
You know
Well,
what I mean? Google Zero.
yeah. Well, I just don't think it's going to happen at all because if you think about like the way that you personally use Google, like sometimes you're like typing a question in the Google where there's like one answer and there's a definitive answer, and for that kind of thing, an AI generated summary might give you what you need. But think of how many Google searches you're doing that are kind of like more open-ended, where you're actually trying to understand a topic or read multiple sources. Like there's no it's not like a definitive answer like how high is the Eiffel Tower or something like that. It's something where you just want a deeper understanding of the subject. And I would say, at least with my own personal experience, like that's a lot of like the things I'm searching for is like I'm like looking for something that happened in the past and I'm trying to like contextualize it for like research for something that I'm looking into, whether it's something to do with my work or something to do with health or something like that. Like I'm actually seeking out, multiple sources. And maybe I'm an outlier, but like, what do you think? Like, I think a lot of people are actually doing these kinds of searches, and those will never go away. Even with the rise of AI.
I don't know. I find myself using AI for just those reasons to
Hmm.
ask about, okay, I have this thought, I have this concept, challenge me on it. Give me reasons why it's not true. Give me the other side. Walk me through it. And over the last couple of years, I mean, like I would not have done this 2 years ago, but recently, I mean, I use OpenAI, I use ChatGPT a lot, I use Gemini a lot. Recently, they've got a lot better on delivering sources as well. So I can look and say, okay, help me with both sides of this question. Help me do some research on it and give me sources so I can dive in myself. So, like I said, it's going to take time. And is it going to happen right away? No, but I think over time, the amount of time we spend with whether it's AI agents or chatbots or whatever, in a number of the things that Meredith does now, dot dash Meredith, whatever they're called, or just some of the more conceptual stuff, like help me think about this problem. I think AI has the potential and is already starting to get us part of the way there.
Well, I mean, like, let's say if you like say I want to you wanted to research like camping gear before buying it. Like, are you going to trust that to an AI, or you want to get like, are you going to want to go to and click through to Wirecutter to see what they specifically said, or what or into a Reddit thread where people have multiple people are talking about their personal experiences, with that camping gear. Like, I feel like I'm often yeah, I'm learning something from the AI generated summary, but like I am maybe I am just like basing this all off my own behavior, but I'm still clicking through to websites on Google on a pretty often basis. But maybe just people are more trustworthy of the AI than I am.
Let me give you an example that actually just happened in my house. So we've wanted to put a projector in the house for a while, and I was researching what do I need for a projector, and I have a thread on ChatGPT in a project called my IoT house. Basically, it's not a great name, but it's me trying to figure out how I'm going to optimize and automate my house. So it knows how my house is configured. It knows how big my living room is. It knows where the lights are and other things because I've been putting smart lights in around. And so I started a conversation with it about projectors and said, what should I do? What should I get? It started putting a lot of different projectors in front of me. Said, these are probably best for what you need. I won't get into all the details,
Mhm.
but it gave me links to Wirecutter. It gave me links to Reddit. I now belong to the subreddit where people go talk about projectors. So I've been going there. I just ended up buying an Epson projector that it recommended. It thought I needed a more high-end one, but this one seemed a good one in the middle. I went back and forth on reasons. I said, okay, go find me, like, should I do a laser one or is it okay to do the RGB one, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a back and forth there that I found really valuable, even though I did go to review sites to check out and to, because it's trust but verify in my mind. And so the review sites all were like, yeah, that's good. I think this will fit your needs. So it really helped with me because it was really easy in this case for it to take the size of my room, which is a weird room, and the way I want to put the projector here on the side and what kind of screen I need over here. And it mapped it out in a way that seemed to work. Now, check back with me next week when I install the screen and the projector, and we'll see if it really does what it's supposed to do. I may sing a different tune in a week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is your prediction that you said that the horizon is long, but eventually, like, we'll grow to trust the AI so much that you won't even feel obligated to click through to those review sites?
I think we'll still want to verify it and click through, or we'll want it to tell us that. The problem is, and this is where it gets weird, is now ChatGPT is going to be running ads, right? One of the things that when you're in a ChatGPT environment or you're in a Gemini environment, there are no ads. It makes it feel a little bit less biased than Google search, where there's all those search ads you have to wade through to find that Reddit link that what you really wanted. So there's something there. Also, it's to me, it's all about adopter sequencing, right? You've got the innovators, the people who are doing it now, early majority, people will start doing it, late majority and the laggards. When do we get to laggards? It's still going to be 30 years out, 20 years out. But I believe more and more of search, what is traditional Google search, will move to these chatbots or agents or whatever they are, as long as we can keep trusting them. If we lose our trust in them because they point us in the wrong way, my projector sucks, and other things, it's going to be hard to get that back.
So what does this mean for publishers? Like, I have this theory that like Google actually led publishers astray because suddenly it was sending them all this traffic and they were placing way too much value on this traffic, and that started they started investing enormous resources into trying to write content to the search algorithms. Most famous example is what time is the Super Bowl, and they stopped like creating content that like was completely servicing their readers. And the thing that they never recognized, and like going back to like US News, when I worked at US News and World Report, like I remember talking to my reporter or my editor and being like, we need to publish more original long form journalism. And he'd be like, why? When I can, like, in the time it takes to publish one original piece, we could put out 10 aggregated pieces and one of them gets picked up on Google News and then it sends like a rush of traffic. And I didn't really have the vocabulary back then to like articulate this point, but I do have it now, is like those were always Google's users. They were never the publisher's audience. Like those people would land on the website, extract the information that they needed, and immediately bounce off. They weren't converting into paid subscribers. They weren't signing up for newsletters. So yeah, you could monetize them with some programmatic ads, but like, the things that were starting publishers starting to value more now, like just like paid subscribers or repeat visitors and stuff like that, they were hitting like Google search was hitting, those Google search users were not hitting any of those KPIs. And
Useless. It
so
was useless.
useless value, useless bounce traffic. And so I guess like part of me is kind of celebrating that a lot of this traffic is going away because it's going to force publishers to focus on the KPIs that actually matter. I don't know, like what are your thoughts on that? Like I spend like zero time, like I get Google traffic to my newsletter, but I spend zero time thinking about it because it's just not important to me.
Yeah, I was probably at Ziff Davis running some of the web stuff when you were at US News and World Report. I remember going through the same thing. We were like, it's great because I can just generate all this stuff and get it out there, and the clicks just keep coming. But in the end, it was pretty useless content, and we had to optimize it for keywords, which made it hard to read. And so the experience for the reader, to your point, went down, went away. And I, The optimist in me says that AI right now, when it's scanning through all of the websites, is looking for useful content and looking for stuff that actually has real value for the reader, the person who's searching, the person who's looking for reviews, and that by citing the websites where you can go deeper, that's a good way to build and find the right links and the right trust and the right content that's developed for the right reasons, rather than just trying to optimize for some crazy search where it's about how dense are your links and how, did you get the right search term in there? And I know it's gotten better since the days when we were sort of feeding the search monster, but it's still not great.
Yeah. And then like some people are saying that this will force publishers and creators to lean more into personalities, that people are going to want to hear what Jim Louderback's take on this or Simon Owens's take on this. So, this is why you're seeing more publishers trying to forge these deals with creators to launch video podcasts or to create content on like their TikTok channel and stuff like that, because that'll be the media that people like specifically seek out versus doing these kind of generic searches that go to websites.
Absolutely. And you know what we lost when Google searches started to become so prevalent is we lost that element of trust. And I remember, I was reviewing computer products at PC Magazine and PC Week. People trusted us. They trusted that when I said I tested this product and I put it through its paces and I ran those benchmarks, that I did that and that I was a trusted reviewer and that you should pay attention to me because of all that. And then we had all these like, oh my God, what Fortune and Forbes used to do with all the farming of links and this and that and untrustworthy information and buying their way to the top, where you really couldn't trust it. And you see the same thing with reviews on Amazon and other ways, people buying reviews and stuff you just can't trust. And so I see a little bit of a return to trust. And again, I am an optimist, but I think we can build a more trusted environment where the people who know what they're talking about can be evaluated by the AI intelligently to deliver the trusted voices and the trusted information in response to those queries versus just who optimized their text or who bought the positioning to get on the first page of search results.
So for your newsletter this week, you wrote a piece titled "Why Athletes Are the New Super Creators." This is a topic I've definitely been following in my newsletter, especially over the last year, and it's really kind of heated up since the Supreme Court had that ruling that allows basically college athletes to monetize their name, image, and likeness (NIL). But also it's obviously in pro sports it's very important as well, and the NFL especially, we've seen in recent years, has been really leaning into this. It was like a few years ago that they really started inviting creators to the Super Bowl and other kinds of games, doing specific partnerships with creators and stuff like that. I'd love to start with talking about the Super Bowl and NFL, and then we could zoom out and just talk about what this means about the larger sports ecosystem. You're probably more of a sports fan than I am. So, like, talk a little bit about this most recent Super Bowl and some of the things that the NFL was doing specifically to partner with creators.
First of all, I have to say, as a Patriots fan, I'm still getting over the loss. Actually, no, I didn't even think they'd win, but I am a Patriots fan, so go Pats. I remember when they used to call the NFL the No Fun League. That's what it stood for. And they wouldn't even let, you had Bill Belichick was like, what do you call it? Like face snap or book twit or something like that. And they, the athletes were, they're on the field, but they had no personality off the field. And what we've seen with creators coming into YouTube, and it's smart, creators coming from YouTube into the NFL, and it's smart for the NFL because they're amplifying the product. And it's particularly smart for something like the Super Bowl, where, what is it, $10 million to buy an ad? You've got to produce the ad and make it and put it out there. But all you're buying, even though you're buying a lot of eyeballs, is awareness. And what creators can do, and so smart brands are then taking creators and they're amplifying the awareness that you get through that Super Bowl ad with the trust and the direct connections to do conversion. And so working together, I called it the arbitrage of authenticity, but working together, you get great returns. And I didn't even put this in the links, so I just read it before we started. But Zaria Parvez, who used to run social over at Duolingo and is responsible for the bird, is now at DoorDash and just wrote this great piece about how at DoorDash she was able to take advertising and social and product and creator and fuse them all together with their 50 cent ad on the Super Bowl. But then all this additional social stuff that they did that seemed to work really well together. And that is kind of the dream. And that's why creators more and more are at these big sporting events. And the NFL realizes it too, because for the NFL, for Gen Z, more Gen Zs are not sports fans than rabid sports fans. And even when they're watching sports, they're on their phone, they're going through, they're looking at things, they're looking at highlights. They're not sitting and watching the game like somebody, a millennial or older, might do. So they have a problem there with their audience getting older, and they believe that creators can help them out.
Yeah, so like obviously the NFL was especially a linear broadcast type of organization in terms of media. Most Gen Z don't even have a cable subscription, and of course, like the NFL is like starting to signing these streaming deals with like Netflix and Amazon, and obviously the major sports broadcast companies like ESPN, they've launched their own streamers where they're starting to show these games. But like in some ways, the to be able to watch an NFL game now, if you don't have a cable subscription, you have to subscribe to a whole bunch of different like five different streaming apps. And so I think there is like a real long-term risk there in terms of especially with younger audiences to where they're not going to be willing to subscribe to all those different platforms just to follow, a single sport. So that's why I think they're trying to use like YouTube and creators and stuff like that to find other ways to reach these people who might be, not really have a lot of familiarity with the NFL.
Yeah, and you can go on YouTube for college games, for football games, watch a recap, 20 minutes of the game, 15 minutes of the game. And yeah, you're served ads, but for a lot of people that serves a great experience. So you do need to get people in there watching the games. Now, I have this is not even a theory, it's a hypothesis, but I think I see it playing out. And it's something that I didn't see as much at the Super Bowl, and I wish I did, which is, yeah, you can have creators who are bringing culture around the Super Bowl. And so you can have your beauty creator, you can have your lifestyle creator there, and they're playing flag football or they're doing this or that. And you can have creators who are journalists like Dose of Society who are out there doing man on the street and covering it, which is great, which is better than I think than a lot of the typical television you see covering the Super Bowl or other football events. But I want to hear more from the athletes themselves. And to me, the athletes are the ones that are going to build community around themselves. And you kick this off by talking about NIL and the name, image, and likeness that happened. And athletes are finding at college that if they lean into, they can build these communities around themselves, whatever sports they're playing. And when they get to the NFL or other pro leagues, they should be able to amplify that and have people want to tune in because it's them, because they're a creator that sits at the center of a community that they're part of, but also it's part of this broader NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, whatever. And so to me, that's the path that sports leagues really need to go on. And I don't think they're there yet. Now, I'm a Patriots fan. Mac Hollins, who was the wide receiver, caught the most passes for the Patriots, not very many. But he is also a TikToker and he does home improvement tips on TikTok. We need more of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember reading sometime of the last year that the NFL has launched some kind of like social media training boot camp. And maybe it was first ostensibly for like going on TV and stuff like that, but the curriculum is increasingly focusing on treating them how to use these different social media channels and stuff like that. Obviously, the Kelsey brothers, the most famous example, but we're seeing more and more pro athletes launch podcasts, YouTube channels, things like that to kind of set themselves up for kind of post career. They're basically, but to your point, especially with the NIL ruling, I think it's going to be more incumbent on athletes earlier and earlier in their careers to start building out these media channels and building out these communities, as you say, because it's going to bring tremendous value to the leagues that they go to. Because like if you're a sports team what is your ultimate goal? Yes, it's to win games, but really it's to get people to tune into the broadcast of your games and to buy tickets to go to your stadium. And you're going and users are going to be or fans are going to be much more invested in doing those things if they have a connection with the players. So like my question I would throw to you is like 10 years from now, you're an NFL team and I don't really know how they recruit and like I know there's like all kinds of agencies and stuff like that, but like you have a choice between player A and player B. Player A, they're both like equal in terms of actual skill, but player A has 10 million Instagram followers. Do you think that is going to be a component in terms of their recruitment of like not just how well they can play, but how well like they can foster these communities?
It's an interesting question. I was just thinking that. So in the draft room, which is what they draft, and if you've got the coach is there and the GM is there and the owner's probably there. And to your point, two wide receivers come up. They're of equal skills. They rank out equally. And one is an amazing creator, or maybe like Drake May, his wife is like an amazing creator, and who's the quarterback for the Patriots, in case you wondered who that was. And maybe I think there's a possibility that it will tip the scales towards them because they're going to have a better social profile. And it's not a negative social profile. That's going to be another thing I think it's going to be very important to keep our eye on is the sorts of profiles that you want. So, I bet a part of that class that you talked about that rookies go through is not just how to be on TV and how to be on social, but what not to put on social, right? So
Mhm.
that's going to be interesting too. And I do think that will be important, but I also don't think like if you're a coach, you're like, I want the best players because I want to win that Super Bowl. And if you're an owner, you want to win the Super Bowl, you win the Stanley Cup or whatever it is.
But isn't there verified data that like Taylor Swift dating Travis Kelce increased the viewership of those games and increased the price of tickets and the attendance and stuff like that? Like, I feel like if you're, especially now that like sports teams owners are now kind of like Silicon Valley startup guys who are thinking about how do we optimize every part of it to like treat this like a real part of the business. Like I think it's going to become like obviously winning games is going to be incredibly important, but I think this is going to be a bigger factor than maybe you're even considering.
I don't know. Like if it was the New York Jets and somebody from the Jets was dating Taylor Swift, I think it would be a lot less of an issue. The other thing is there aren't that many Taylor Swifts. It's a special snowflake. So you can try and optimize for getting a superstar in there, but I think you need a good team so people pay attention. But I do agree with you that if you've got a Kelsey brothers or some like Stephon Diggs, who's the wide receiver for the Patriots right now. I think Cardi B is his girlfriend, but that didn't get nearly the lift that Taylor Swift and Kelsey did. She's not as big, but it's still big.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just like to paraphrase Billy Bean in Moneyball, like we're never gonna get another Giambra. We have to rebuild him and out and I forget what it is. But basically
Yeah.
it's not that you got to get someone dating another Taylor Swift, but like if you had a whole roster team full of, social media stars that maybe in aggregate you could build the equivalent of a Taylor Swift in terms of viewership and stuff like that.
Well, and a good example for that, I'm going to take your point of view on it, and I'm sure he is an amazing pitcher. Paul Skenes, who just pitches for the Pirates. Livy Dunn, who is a huge Instagrammer, is his girlfriend. They both went to LSU, and even though he's not really a creator that much, because the two of them are sort of this creator power couple, there's a lot of interest in the Pirates that there wouldn't otherwise be because he's a great pitcher. He just won. I know he did Rookie of the Year. I think he may have won the Cy Young Award this year. But anyway, he's an amazing pitcher. I'm a Mets fan, but I would watch him pitch anytime, in part because I've seen him and Livy on Instagram and TikTok, and I just think their stories are so good.
Yeah. Well, there's also the point that like NFL is kind of a singular sport, like football, and there's only a few like really huge sports like, football, basketball, soccer, and a few others, whereas there's tons of athletes out there. Like I'm a runner, a very bad runner, but like I watch a lot of running YouTube channels, and I would warrant to say that there are more professional runners today than any other time in history because they're not like making their money from their running. They're making from their like vlogs about running and their training videos and stuff like that. Like there are so many runners now that have anywhere from like 500 or 50,000 to like 250,000 followers on YouTube and maybe the equivalent on Instagram. And if you're that large, you're large enough to get some like athletic sponsorships and stuff like that. And I feel like there are a lot more athletes like that now, like gymnasts, tennis players, like people who aren't like at the pro level or they're not like getting paid like a salary by a team or something, but like they can make a living now, as athletes, even though really what they're doing is making a living as media personalities.
Yeah, look, perfect example. I was out at a Super Bowl party last week because I live in the Bay Area and it was here. And I ran into a college wrestler who also happens to be on the Filipino national team, uh, Hayden Taylor Anchetta. And, super smart, great guy, has over 100,000 followers on Instagram. He's got millions of views. He's doing collabs with people. He's working with a wrestling clothing line. I don't know that much about wrestling, but he's got fans that, yeah, they're Filipino fans, they're American fans, but he's got fans because he is a wrestler and because he's doing this. And so if you're a wrestling fan, you probably know him.
Yeah. So this was a big week for YouTube because for the first time I think in Google's history, it broke out YouTube specific revenue line and it just had the blockbuster number that in the last year YouTube generated over $60 billion in revenue alone, and that was through a mixture of advertising. It of course has a monster advertising business, but like what something a lot of people don't realize is it also has a massive subscription business as well. Like it has over 100 million paid subscribers across its various like premium tiers, whether it's YouTube Premium or YouTube Music or YouTube TV. So it has more than like what Paramount and Peacock and several major streamers, and it doesn't even lock any content behind a paywall. And this has been just like from a PR perspective, a great year for YouTube because Nielsen also started breaking out, time spent watching connected TVs across both linear TV and apps. And we've really found out in just the last year or two that YouTube is completely dominating in terms of watch time on connected TVs. Never mind what people are watching on desktop on their mobile phones. This is just people sitting at their TVs watching the YouTube app. So, just a really, banner year for YouTube. But one thing to also keep in mind is that almost half of that revenue is going to creators. So it's also great for the creator economy as well. I guess like my question for you is where is all this going? Like is like this almost at like the top of YouTube's power, or is it, kind of my prediction is we're only still on the beginning of the growth curve and YouTube is eventually going to kind of subsume Hollywood in some ways. So like where do you think we are on YouTube's growth curve?
It's the beginning or the middle of the growth curve. I mean, in
Hmm.
general, we are, when it comes to attention we spend with media, we're out of time. So every minute that they take, they have to take from somebody else. But they've
Hmm.
proven very good at that.
Yeah.
To your point, they're on big screen TVs. They're a bigger streamer than Netflix. I mean, if you just look at the numbers just alone from their revenue, if you compare them to Netflix, they're 15% larger in revenue. They're no, about 30% larger in revenue. If you compare them, it's about a third smaller than Disney. So they're right up there as a major media company. And Disney, for example, is only about 42, 43 billion in their video media world. The rest is theme
Mhm.
parks and merch and things like that. So
Yeah.
they are a leader, and I think they have so much more room to grow. The other thing that's really interesting about this is YouTube only pays creators. Their content spend only happens after they've received money for people viewing that content.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're Netflix or Disney, you're paying money up front to buy your content and then hoping to make it on the back end. So
Yeah.
it's a more sustainable model. YouTube wins in almost every particular way that you can think about winning. I mean, sure, Netflix could buy their top 100 creators, but there's still millions and millions of other creators there. And we haven't even started to scratch the surface of scripted. Like most of YouTube is non-scripted. It's reality TV. It's hey everyone, look at what I got, and it's not scripted. And now we're seeing this with micro dramas. We're seeing it with Darman. We're seeing it with a couple of other folks that are getting more into scripted, more into narrative, more into those longer form or micro narratives. And so there's a lot of headroom there.
Yeah, to your point, they've basically created the perfect flywheel because, as you say, they only pay for the hits. They don't pay, $100 million to produce a show that ends up being like a complete flop. Like they're only sharing revenue that's actually generated by that creator. And so what they do is like they give almost 50% of their revenue to the creators. Those creators then take that money and they reinvest it in their channels and then do even more spectacular, more highly produced stuff. And then that obviously then they're able to grab more attention from all the other media companies. Like, to your point, like basically we've maximized the amount of time spent with media. So now they're just stealing market share from other media companies. And then that generates more revenue, which then goes back to the creator where they can spend more and more money. So you get like creators like Mr. Beast, who's now spending millions of dollars per video, which is about what it costs to produce an episode of TV. So it's only a matter of time before I think we start seeing like prestige TV start showing up on you like natively on YouTube or like blockbuster movies because the budgets are going to keep on going up further and further. And to your point, like we're already starting to see that with creators like Darman, where they're kind of created like he's basically recreated the after school special, like the Saved by the Bell type of stuff. But he's built out a studio, he's hiring actors, he's writing scripts, he's doing production, he's doing editing. It looks like TV. And yeah, it's kind of lowbrow right now, but that's because YouTube's still in the early stages of the growth of its growth, and I think as the economics start looking better and better, it's only going to the content's only going to go up in quality from here.
Yeah, there are a couple of things on the horizon that are interesting. One is you bring up Darman and some of these studios. We're seeing a more and more top talent, top execs moving from traditional media over to these YouTube studios. His CEO, Darman's CEO, is my old boss at Discovery, Sean Atkins, who I sold my YouTube network to. We see this at Mark Rober's company, where another ex-Discovery person, Scott Lewis, is over there as chief content officer. You see that in a lot of different places, which what it does mean is that you have execs who are used to building these franchises and multi-layer companies and areas that bring in money outside of ad revenue. And we see this happening in those places as well. So interestingly and I was doing some back of the number calculations, don't hold me to this, but the creators that are building on YouTube, that creator economy, they get about half their income from YouTube AdSense and advertising. The other half they generate themselves through brand deals that they put on the video, through merch, through courses, through private communities and other things. As that grows, will YouTube become less important to them? Don't know. But other people are now bringing their content in, like Tubi is working with creators,
Yeah.
Netflix is working with creators. But the real risk, and it was sort of an unsaid thing, but you can see that YouTube is scared about this. And Neil Mohan said this in his letter that he posted a couple of weeks ago about priorities for YouTube, is kids. So kids are kind of get them hooked on YouTube Kids, have them grow. I mean, YouTube Kids have killed kids on like Nickelodeon and Disney. It's all on YouTube. But we're starting to see kids being banned. Australia has banned under 15. France is doing it. It looks like Germany, I think, might do it. There are a couple of other countries. So if this takes off, if we see social and YouTube stuffed into the social bucket as part of these bans, which we see in Australia, that could really cut their flywheel as they try and bring people into the fold. And it could really cut down what they're doing. And I don't know how that's going to play out, but that's one worry I have. I had to come up with at least one.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if like, YouTube already has YouTube Kids, if it like radically transforms like an app like that and makes it so has absolutely no social features. So it can argue legally it's not a social media company, or at least in that specific app or something like that. Like, is the TV version of YouTube, which is probably logged into the parent's account anyway, like,
Yeah.
is that social media? Yeah, I don't know. But
I don't know, but there's definitely a risk there. But I think you're right. It's super smart. Sure, there's a Skunkworks team over in San Bruno, which is like about 10
yeah.
miles from me. sitting there trying to figure out, okay, what if we come out with just a separate thing that's just for kids in case this snowballs? That would be
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah. Well, and then also, everybody is realizing the YouTuber power, so you're starting to see uh starting to see YouTubers kind of break into more traditional media at like a very accelerated pace. Like Salish and Jordan Matter, they just signed a huge deal with like a basically an open-ended creative deal from what I've heard, where they're just going to work with Netflix it's the same thing that like Shonda Rhimes and Ryan Murphy had the deals they had with Netflix, where it's like you're just going to come here and we're going to pay you a ton of money to just help us produce and ideate shows and stuff like that. And then is it Markiplier? How do you pronounce this guy?
Markiplier, like multiplier,
Markiplier.
Markiplier. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. His
Markiplier.
movie.
Yeah, so like he decided to self-finance, self-distribute that through theaters, and in its first weekend, it generated over $18 million. So it was even if that were a mainstream movie, that would have been considered a successful, theatrical opening box office number, especially considering how much it didn't really cost that much money
Yeah,
to
like
make the
three
movie.
million or something, right?
Yeah, so I feel like we're passing through this kind of blood-brain barrier where the kind of world of like the creator economy and traditional media are just kind of starting to kind of meld together, and then eventually the creator economy, like all the future filmmakers, it used to be that you started with music videos, or you started directing the commercials, or you started as like an assistant and moved up to like a line producer, and then you got to direct your first TV episode or something like that. Whereas like I feel like the filmmakers, the Martin Scorseses, the David Simons of 10 to 20 years from now, they're all going to start on like YouTube or TikTok and stuff like that, and they're going to learn their skills that way, and then eventually, graduate into mainstream Hollywood.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think interesting facts, or just thoughts on, first the Markiplier movie. I mean, he was originally going to open in just a couple hundred theaters and ended up telling his audience, he's like, hey, right to the theaters, get me in more theaters. And I think he opened up in 2000. So it shows the power of a creator in a community. But it's not, it doesn't work all the time. We had Ryan from Ryan's Toys, put something together. It cost like 10 million to create. I think they only made 600,000 in the first opening. So it's not always the case that you can do that, but right, it shows the power of the right community, the right creator, and we'll see where it goes from there. On
Yeah.
the thing with Jordan and Salish, I think it's great. Jordan Matter has been a OG YouTuber in the photo space and other areas, and Salish's daughter has just like gone through the roof. They had 50 or 60 or 70,000 people show up at this mall in New Jersey when she rolled out I think it was a Sephora line of makeup. And I talked to him right after that, and it was like, they didn't expect that. They had thought about doing events. And he was like, no one's going to show up to an event we do. And oh my God, they had that many people show up. So the power of the event that Salish did, the power of the Netflix deal, I think is opening a lot of people's eyes, creators' eyes, as well as people in media, to the power of what, when you have this audience in the palm of your hand, this community and this connection to them, you can build a lot of things on the back of it.
Yeah, so I was watching like a Colin and Samir interview with Jordan after that Netflix deal was announced, and that's his name, right? The dad, it's Jordan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jordan Matter.
yeah.
Yeah.
He was saying that he had been pitching a bunch of shows at different, or had a specific show in mind and had been pitching it to a bunch of different streamers. And it was after that Sephora thing where like 60,000 people showed up that Netflix decided, not only do we want this show, but we want to do like a whole open-ended deal with you, is because they really realized like, this is incredible if you can get 60, 80,000 people to show up to a single mall. Like obviously there's like a very devoted audience here, and we want to work with you on a much wider basis.
Also, just as a fun fact, Salish isn't his only YouTube star child. His son Hudson's actually really good and really interesting and is kind of amazing. I've seen them both. I actually interviewed them both on stage at one point, and they're so cool. So I'm really excited for the whole family.
Does he have his own YouTube channel as
Yep.
well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of either of them until this news broke with the Netflix news.
Yeah, and if you're a photographer, go look at Jordan's older stuff because he's a great photographer and did a lot of content teaching people to become really good photographers. So I think look, we are seeing the movement towards a world where creators aren't just being courted by Hollywood, they're becoming Hollywood. They're becoming media companies. And it used to be like in the early days of YouTube when I was doing Revision 3, creators were over here and traditional media was over here. Creators didn't care about traditional media, and traditional media were like, it's just a bunch of UGC stuff. And now it's almost like it's a spectrum, but it's almost like the power has shifted, not completely towards creators, but more and more creators are getting to the point where they don't need Hollywood to build Hollywood style success. And that's a really good position to be in for at least some creators.
Yeah, and plenty of them are just rejecting that. Like they're having these discussions with the streamers and they're deciding, you know what, like I built my audience on YouTube. This would require me to walk away from YouTube basically why do I need you when I can go direct to my audience?
Yeah, and that's not a new story. When I sold Revision 3 to Discovery, and I'd already been working with VidCon a little bit, they really wanted the guy who was running all of it, who Sean worked for, really wanted to meet Hank Green. They're like, oh, we want to put him on TV. We want to put Hank Green on TV. He's this great science communicator. I'm sure he wants to do it. And I'm like, he'll have dinner with you at VidCon this year, but he doesn't want to be on TV. And he didn't. He was really clear. It's like, I don't want to go be on TV. I have more than enough to do and getting more than enough satisfaction in my life being on YouTube, doing my events, and doing all the other stuff I'm doing.
Yeah. A year or two ago, I wrote about this headline, like the largest media company that you've never heard of, and it was all about Complexly
Nice.
because he doesn't like people know who Hank Green and his brother John Green are because of their Vlog Brothers channel, and they might know about individual channels in Complexly, but they don't really realize like how huge that company was in terms of its reach because A, it's not a legacy media company, and B, it wasn't a VC funded media company, so most media journalists, media industry journalists weren't covering it, and yeah, I think that company is just like incredibly fascinating.
Did you see what they just did with that company?
I did,
They
yeah.
went nonprofit,
Yeah, yeah,
which
pretty
is
incredible.
which is really cool. It's totally in line with both Hank and John's morals and their vision. Some of the best people in the world, and Hank's got so many businesses. And Julie Walsh, who's running it, is great, and I know they're going to do really well, and it's gonna be a really good thing for them. Mark Rober's also launching a nonprofit for science education, so who knows? Maybe next time we get together, we'll talk about the trend of nonprofits and creators. See where that goes.
Yeah. So the final item I want to talk about today, and it kind of dovetails what we're talking about with like the streamers courting creators, is kind of like what Spotify and Netflix are doing. Like you would think that these two companies would be at odds with each other, but they just announced like a rash of deals where Netflix is going to basically start licensing and rebroadcasting some of the video podcast from Spotify. And Spotify just released an earnings report, I think today, saying that it is showing that it's had record user growth, record revenue growth, record profitability. And I'd love to just like hear your thoughts on like what's going on here. Like my thinking basically is it's like an enemy of my enemy is my friend type of situation. Whereas Netflix sees that YouTube is completely dominating on TVs, and then Spotify is trying to lure its own creators onto its platform with revenue share and stuff like that. But currently, Spotify is mainly consumed through phones and doesn't have much of a TV presence. And then, Netflix doesn't really have a huge pipeline into the creator economy, which Spotify has. And so they're just kind of like basically teaming up together to just try to see if they can work together to steal market share away from YouTube. What do you think about that?
I think it's smart. I think the problem Spotify has is the audio podcasts are great. The move towards podcasts is everybody's doing video, and Spotify still doesn't have the video consumption habit baked in. I mean, I
Yeah.
use Spotify. I listen to podcasts and other things all the time. I never watch video, and I'm focus group of one, but I think it's going to be hard for them to do that. But the podcasters that they have nurtured, that they either own or work with or have deep connections with, are all doing video. And what better place to do is to put it on Netflix instead of YouTube, or focus on Netflix. And podcasts in many ways are becoming video properties and podcasting becoming just a video format. And that's a great place for Netflix to expand what it's doing. And, and I think, and again, YouTube bigger than Netflix, Spotify, YouTube Music is challenging in many ways what Spotify is doing. So it is, I think you hit the nail on the head with the enemy of my enemy. And it makes me wonder, although I don't have the valuations in front of me, and you probably know better than me, but if Netflix doesn't get Warner Brothers Discovery, do they turn around and buy Spotify?
Oh, that would be a lot of money, but I don't think they do. I don't think they want to
Yeah.
be in the I don't think they want to be in the platform game. Like I think they're more a media company than they are a tech company. But like to like the watching video podcasts like that, the reason they're so valuable to YouTube is because these things are cheap to produce, but they're lean back experiences. Like you could sit there, pull it up and watch it on your TV. But like I was Googling today, does Spotify have a Roku app? And apparently it does, but I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people are watching Spotify video content on their TVs, but they are watching a lot of Netflix content on their TVs. So I do think, just having Spotify content on Netflix is just going to open up their shows to like a much wider audience than they would have otherwise.
Yep, agreed. And also, I mean, look, even though podcasting may be moving more towards video, it's still a format where you don't need to watch the video to get the most out of the podcast. Like, we're doing this here. I don't know what percentage of people are doing something else while they're listening, but you don't really need to see our beautiful faces to get the most out of this podcast format. And that I think is an important distinction where, it if they could get a big Roku presence, who knows? But people watching on Netflix going to be doing other things, walking around, and it's great because podcasting. The other thing about podcasting is it's such an intimate medium. It sits inside of your brain because it's mostly audio, and the depth of connection and experience that you can do with a good podcast, I would argue, is stronger than most videos that you see on YouTube. So there is a depth of trust that you can get when someone's talking inside your head when you're not watching, or maybe you're watching now and then, than watching Mr. Beast or watching other video like that.
Yeah. And it's also just super cheap for Netflix to
Yeah.
experiment with this because it just like compared to what it costs to make an episode of Stranger Things or even a reality show, it's just so little money. So they can throw enough money at like up and coming YouTubers to like host their video versions of their podcast on Netflix without it, doing anything to break the bank. And if it ends up being hugely popular, then that's just like easy filler content that they can do. And also it's a way for them to tap into, the growing creator economy is basically plucking out the most promising the most promising growing creators and then, putting them on Netflix.
Yeah, I had a thought I wrote in my newsletter, which seems to be playing out, even though it didn't happen or may not happen. But if Netflix doesn't get WBD, do they turn around and take all that money that they would have put in and just go buy the top 100 podcasters and creators on YouTube and Spotify and elsewhere, or some number, and co-opt culture that way?
Yeah. Yeah. And just basically every time YouTube has like a creator that bubbles up, they wait for it to reach a certain level and then they pluck them and then pull them off of YouTube, basically. I think they're probably having to overpay, for what Warner Brothers Discovery in terms of like you're not just paying for the content, you have to make it worth its while to like all the executives, to all the shareholders and everything like that. So you're paying like a huge premium over what that content is ultimately worth versus paying a creator who, is making pennies on the dollar compared to Hollywood anyway, slightly more money to create wholly original content for you. I think that money would be, more well spent doing that.
And the other thing that we're seeing is some of the value of WBD is the back catalog, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
they have this big back catalog. But we're showing now that YouTubers and podcasters' back catalog actually has value. That's what
Mhm.
Tubi is buying and putting out there. And the Mark Rober, the stuff that's running, I think it's back catalog stuff on Netflix
It
now, even though
is.
they're
Yeah.
doing an
Mhm.
original series.
Yeah.
So if you went
Miss
out and bought,
Rachel, Coco Melon, it's all back catalog stuff.
you go out and buy the top 100 YouTubers who've been out there for 5 years or more, and you get a lot of good back catalog. And by the way, this was one of the problems with Mr. Beast on Prime with Beast Games for the first season. They only owned the Mr. Prime that they paid for, and you'd watch Beast, you'd watch one of the, the Beast Games episodes, and you'd be like, I want to see more Mr. Beast. Well, guess I got to go to YouTube. And
Yeah.
so that was a fail on their part. And I think everybody's learned from that.
Well, Jim, we had some other items we want to get to, but we've run out of time today, so
Yes, we
we'll have
have.
to table that for next time. But it was great talking to you. Where can people find you online?
LinkedIn, go find Jim Louderback, Jay Louderby, subscribe to my newsletter, or go to Beehive and do it. And if you really want, my website is still active, and I put my stuff up there at louderback.com, but you have to know how to spell my last name.
Awesome. Well, as we said in the beginning, this is kind of an experiment. So if this is something you like, something that you want to see more of, definitely reach out to both of us and let us know, because we'll probably try this out again, and we'll probably be tweaking the format and try out a few different things. But thank you so much for joining me, Jim.
Thanks for having me. It was super fun. I love talking about this stuff. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, have a great day.
You too.